2-1 since we debated. How are we going to?
You should turn in your notes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. I need a copy of your case too. For Julio and Amber. Oh, I haven't. Never mind. Got it.
How long is the rebuttal?
What's up?
How long is the rebuttal again?
The second speech?
Yeah.
The rebuttal is also 4 to 6 minutes.
Not a problem.
All right, let's see. Who would we like to judge this debate? Who hasn't judged the debate yet? That's the question.
I know we have a lot.
I know, I almost called on you again.
Oh.
You're so good at it. She's gone.
She likes to sleep. Yeah.
She should judge it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, surprisingly, most of the classes actually here, we just have a small class.
Can I take a nap?
We're just missing, really missing 2 people.
Let's all take a nap. Enough to like when you were little.
All right, we know they love to judge debates, so we'll give it to Claire and Magna.
Yay.
Aaron's like, why do I always get lumped in? All right. Now we're ready to go. So let's hear it for the Prime Minister's opening speech. Come back, Katie. Come back.
Good morning.
All right, ready when you are.
All right, let's see. Hello, all. How would you react if you found out I attempted suicide? I think many of you would pity me, that I would find life not worth living. Some of you may recommend professional help for my depression, or recommend I take a certain drug to ease the pain of my soul, or some other futile antidote to the general unhappy condition of man. However, not many of you will find it instinctive or intuitive to condemn me. How many of you will tell a suicidal person that he is doing something wrong? You may say that he is doing something imprudent and foolish, but not necessarily immoral. I may burn and destroy all the money in my bank account, and while many of you may say this is not the wisest thing to do, very few of you will say, well, this was a morally wrong thing to do. Why is this the case? It is the case because we all recognize that we have autonomy, that is, sovereign rule over ourselves. Because we have sovereign rule over ourselves, we can do whatever we please with ourselves. Just like we have sovereign rule over our money, we can choose to do whatever we wish with our money, like give it away. This autonomy is one of the grounding principles that helps us realize that slavery is a morally wrong practice. Slavery is wrong because we have rule and sovereignty over another when we have no right to make such a claim. Now then, we exercise this sovereignty to commit suicide, and generally nobody thinks twice about it. We then ask, which is worse, the utter annihilation of oneself, thus ending our autonomy, or the abuse of ourselves, where our autonomy is still intact? It is clear that suicide is much worse than abuse. For example, if I were to beat my wife, I don't have a wife, but if I were to beat my wife, yeah, don't think I'm a bad guy. If I were to beat my wife, my punishment would be lesser than if I had murdered her. I did not destroy her precious autonomy, but I did damage it. But damage can be repaired for and amended, but the same cannot be said about annihilation. That is why annihilation or death is much more worse, because it cannot be reversed or amended for. Now, if something like suicide is permissible under autonomy, then it is obvious that something of a lesser degree should also be permissible. Therefore, self-abuse should also be permissible. The proposition we are defending today is this: the government should legalize drugs. And the value behind that is our autonomy. We're not talking about liberties, things granted to us by the government, but autonomy grounded in the intrinsic worth of every human being. With our autonomy being firmly established, and it being clear that our autonomy is something that is not morally permissible to be intruded upon. We argue that government telling us that we are not allowed to do what we please with our bodies is an intrusion upon our autonomy and is therefore not morally permissible. Thank you. Our opponents are expected to argue that taking certain drugs will do harm to the individual, and we proudly respond by saying, so what? Who are you to tell me what I can or cannot do with myself? You wouldn't put me in a jail for an attempt to suicide, so why would you make a criminal to do something less than that? It isn't consistent. So long as you are trying to override my autonomy with your well-intentioned policies, just like white slave owners justified slavery by saying black people couldn't take care of themselves and didn't know better, thus overriding their autonomy, you are being immoral. We have been arguing so far that drugs should not be illegal, and we've given principled reason for this thesis. However, we want to define the word legal a little bit differently. When people say this thing should be legal, what they generally mean is that things should be permissible to do and do without repercussion from the law. This is what we are going to call the spirit of legalizing drugs. And this is what we wish to remain true to. Not necessarily the words, but the spirit. We wish to remain true to this because, strictly speaking, it is not necessary for something to be positively legal for it to be permissible. For example, in California, it is not legal for same-sex couples to get married. However, it is not illegal either. There needs to be a threat of law. It is not criminal in California for a gay couple to get married. All that happens is that California turns a blind eye to it and refuses to acknowledge it. When something is made legal, we generally approve of it. When we make something illegal, we generally disapprove of it. When it is neither legal or illegal, government remains silent. We ask the same to be done to the status of drugs. Instead of making the positive claim that drugs should be, strictly speaking, legal, as if we wanted government to approve of it, we want to make the negative claim that drugs should not be illegal and not to disprove of it. What we are asking for is neutrality. This is much a more modest claim and will have essentially the same effect as drugs being legalized, and so we remain true to the spirit of legalizing drugs and will suffice for our defense. The status quo is violating our autonomy. This must be changed. Our plan is to simply decriminalize the use of all drugs. This is to be done by the U.S. federal government, and states can change their laws accordingly because they also have sovereign rule or autonomy. Though we urge them to decriminalize drugs on the exact same grounds. The federal government should do this immediately, but the DEA should be completely crumbling by now. There is nothing to enforce because there is nothing illegal. There is some advantages to our plan. Government money on drug agencies and prosecutions will completely vanish. Drug kingpins will lose power, and if they should decide to make an official market out of their business, because it's not illegal anymore, FDA regulations will have jurisdiction over the matter. So if you're worried about regulation, FDA's got that covered. With drugs being decriminalized, waste on petty drug charges and incarcerating nonviolent criminals will also disappear, hence saving us some money. Oh, can you do me a favor? It costs $47,102 a year to incarcerate somebody, and 20% of all people incarcerated, it's 18% for state, 20% for federal, but it's 20. So 20% of all people in jail are there for drug-related charges. So 20% of the whole jail system is just gone because it's just not illegal anymore. It's not a crime to do things with drugs.
And that's time. Alright, so I'll start you guys. Actually, you guys have questions first. Alright, so start your prep time.
I'll do it in my closing. There you go.
No. Alright, let's hear for leader of opposition.
Good morning, everyone, and to opposition, thank you for showing up to let us know your point of view. We're here with the FAD, Families Against Drugs. Today we have the privilege of bringing up the case on why the United States federal government should not allow drugs to be legal. We disagree with the government plan. They want to let harmful drugs be allowed to be used, sold, and destroy kids, teens, dads, moms, sisters, brothers, and all those who are in this great country, even if they have the right to harm themselves. We want to keep American families together, alive, and off drugs that can kill them. One of the drugs that is harmful is marijuana. THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, hijacks and corrupts the natural process of cannabinoids, a key family chemical that help guide the brain to proper maturation, that play key roles in memory formation, learning, decision making. Impaired short-term memory, marijuana can make it hard to learn and retain information, particularly complex tasks. Slow reaction time and impaired motor coordination. It can throw off athletic performance, impair driving skills, and increase risk of injuries. It can also alter judgment and decision making. And as experts say, this can contribute to high-risk sexual behaviors that can lead to spread of sexual transmitted disease. It increases heart rate, which can jump by 200% to 100%, and can increase the risk of heart attack, especially in otherwise vulnerable individuals. It alters mood, and in some, marijuana can induce euphoria and calmness. In high doses, it can cause anxiety and paranoia. LSD is another drug that's a hallucinogen. Users see images, hear sounds, and feel sensations that seem very real but do not exist. LSD users often experience loss of appetite, sleeplessness, dry mouth, and tremors. Visual changes are among the more common effects. The user can become fixated on the intensity of certain colors. Not only do they dissociate from their usual activities in life, but they also feel the urge to keep taking more of the drug in order to re-experience the same sensation. Others experience severe terrifying thoughts and feelings, fear of losing control, fear of insanity and death, and despair while using LSD. Once it starts, there's often no stopping a bad trip, which can go on for up to 12 hours. In fact, some people never recover from an acid-induced psychosis. There is also a link between illegal drug use and more rapid HIV disease progression, particularly in people who inject heroin, cocaine, or methamphetamines, because the needles are infected with it and are not cleaned. Millions of people worldwide are injected drug users, and blood transfers through the sharing of drug-taking equipment, particularly infected needles, which is an extremely effective way of transmitting HIV. Around 30% of global HIV infections outside of sub-Saharan Africa are caused by the use of injecting drugs, and it accounts for an ever-growing proportion of those living with the virus. Our counter plan we conceived is to influence as many individuals as possible in the United States to not consume drugs. We have the National Board of Education ratify the curriculum to emphasize more on education on drugs. Teens 13 years and older who are caught consuming or possession of drugs are to be sent to the state penitentiaries for planned field trips in which they will see the horrors of consuming and possessing drugs firsthand. Individuals who want to make a difference in their communities will volunteer to give a hand in our country. Off-duty police officers will be required to give 10 to 15 hours a month of volunteer work in their communities as role models and helping kids not to consume drugs. All those who are caught either consuming or in possession of drugs will have to do community service, either cleaning freeways or neighborhoods to help to build character. By giving offenders community service instead of just time in jail, we will be making sure our environment is rid of garbage while they build character, and will hopefully realize that they don't need the drugs. The amount of service they would be required to do will depend on the severity of the offense they have committed. Those who actually committed a crime, though, would be processed as they normally would. Our agency, our government officials, the Drug Enforcement Administration, which is the DEA, the state officials, and county officials and volunteers. The enforcement is the Drug Enforcement Administration, local police, support groups, ex-drug addicts who want to help and not let people make the same mistakes they did, and off-duty officers. The plan we are proposing will start immediately as we have no time to waste. The school system will be ratified to emphasize more on educating our children with the dangers of consuming drugs, the long-term effects, and the damage it causes to families, the health, and the future of those who do. We will create after-school programs in which students will participate in sports, educational games, and even get help with their homework. All the staff would be off-duty police officers and local volunteers. Jails will begin having meet the offenders once a month, in which those teams that are caught with drugs will have mandatory assist. The problem in which community service would be performed would begin as soon as possible as well. Our plan solves the problem by stopping it at the core, making sure less individuals use drugs and preventing the consumption of originating drug abuse at an earlier age. The plan we're proposing avoids disadvantages with the help from volunteers who are not expected to be paid, so we're not really paying for them. Our other additional advantages are helping kids make the right decisions by saying no to drugs, educating them more about the dangers of drugs and long-term consequences, and by keeping kids active and bringing out the competitive side in them.
And that's time. Questions from the other team?
Yeah. You said instead of sending people to jail, that they're gonna do community service, but then you also mentioned that those who commit a crime will go to jail. What kind of crimes do you have in mind there?
Like.
Because I mean, if you're keeping drugs criminal, then anybody who has possession of drugs is committing a crime and would therefore go to jail.
Not being like a federal crime, but not necessarily having the drugs or using them. Those who do have the drug or use them, we're gonna make them do community service. But if they actually do something dangerous or like robbery or murder or something because of the drug, then they will be obviously in jail.
So it's not a drug-related crime; it's just crime.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
But
so that has nothing to do with the drugs then.
No, I mean if they do it because of the drugs, we're not gonna be like, oh well, even though you use the drugs, and we said that if you use the drugs, you're gonna be community service. No, because if you did a crime, then forget the community.
Yeah, but that's already. I mean, that's already criminal. So I mean, I don't see how that's a plan or.
We just don't want to
changing.
excuse people who use the drugs because we're saying community service for the users.
I don't think anyone's.
Okay.
Okay.
Raise those concerns in the next session. I'll start your guys' prep time for the member of government.
Contradiction. Okay, she says it harms other people even though they have the right. So, like, what do they want? Do they want the right to for their autonomy or not? And say if not, then it's a slippery slope. It leads to slavery either way. So it's like, don't even know. Like, what would you do? And she said that it should be illegal because they don't care. Yeah, and she said that it shouldn't be legal because it harms others even though they have the right to harm themselves. So it's like, you gotta tension there, you have to resolve that. And then she gave me these silly arguments that they should be illegal because of like impairment and judgment, like a judgment. Like, you don't make it illegal because I can't use. And it's like, those are weak. You have to have something in the washroom. Another point that she brought up, I think was good. She said education is going to give you knowledge and
1 minute.
and so say that when they're legal, that we have more education. When we take the test, and everybody's can test them, everyone can test them, and we have more subjects. And if you want to see the effects, the best way to see the effects is to coach. I'm not sure. So, I'm also taking the trash to get dry, so go.
All right, let's hear for the member of government.
So I just want to say thank you guys for coming out too. We appreciate your arguments, and we understand that you are opposed to the legalization of these drugs. You mentioned that you're going to have off-duty officers and volunteers that are educating. How well educated are these educators going to be? So what kind of information will they be providing? If they're not going to be receiving any sort of payment, what will be the incentive? I mean, you can have a drive to make a change, people who have like a personal drive, but as far as the bigger scale of it and educating the whole country, how long will that last for people just doing it out of the good of their own heart? You'll have to have educators that are well aware of what's going on with current drugs, new things that are happening, prevent that from becoming an issue, not just the drugs that we have currently. You mentioned also that you don't want them, there's going to be an issue with driving skills and whatnot. We're not changing anything with that. It's still illegal to drive while impaired, intoxicated, under any other drugs or alcohol. The same way, we're not trying to change that at all. We're trying to decriminalize the drugs themselves. So you can use them for your personal use, but you can't be out doing crimes, as you said. So we're against the crimes too, but as far as doing the drugs themselves, we don't see that as a crime. You also mentioned athletic impairment. We don't feel that's really a big issue because we've heard and seen athletes, perform up to par, even under drugs. In some cases, enhancing their performance. So we think that's kind of irrelevant and not really supporting your case. But we do feel that education is key, and that's a big point in ours too. We want to make sure that people have the knowledge. We want to make it readily available. So we want to have people know what's going on, what's in their drugs. We'd like people to, when they make a purchase at a store, at a CVS or Rite Aid, wherever we're going to be selling these drugs, we want them to have all of the ingredients labeled, just like a pack of cigarettes would have a Surgeon General warning. We want to have it just like that. You have everything available to you. People will have the knowledge. They're gonna know what they're purchasing. They're not going to be ignorant. They're not going to be purchasing some drug that's made in someone's home, off the street. You're not going to be doing some sketchy drug deal. You're going to be knowledgeable, and everyone's going to be well educated as to what is being purchased and the effects, and also the side effects. So we feel that the people should have the right to make their own decision on that. And how Adrian mentioned about autonomy, it also aligns with the self-determination theory, which essentially constitutes free will. So this is a land of the free, and we should be free people. We should be free to make our own decisions based on our intelligence on such a topic. So should we not have the freedom to make our own decisions? And if people are making the wrong decisions, then do we really? No, I'm not gonna do that. We want people to be better educated, so we want them to make the right decisions, and we want the future to be able to.
Open future.
Yeah, an open future. Basically, we want a better future. We don't want people to not do drugs because they're told they can't do drugs. We want people to not do drugs because they know they shouldn't do drugs. So we don't want people to just abide by the rules and have to be guided to everything they need, in life. And they should be smarter, and we should be evolving constantly. So why not allow us to gain that knowledge and make the right decision on our own, and allow us to be a better people. And any other questions? Anybody? From the opposing team? No questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, shoot.
So were you guys saying you're gonna go ahead and put all drugs inside of a pharmacy?
Yeah, we want to make them available. Eventually, get them into pharmacies, but we're gonna. We just like to decriminalize them and leave it open.
Yeah, so the point is to be decriminalized. Now, if somebody who owns like a poppy field wants to put it into the market because it's no longer illegal, then they can feel free to do so. But then that falls under FDA regulations because it is a drug, pharmaceutical. So they could be. They don't have to be, but they could be.
So that everyone is gonna be knowing what they're consuming. How do you know that everyone is still like people are still ignorant about what they're taking and they still prefer the street drug instead?
If they prefer a street
Yeah.
drug,
Yeah, I mean, the reason they are ignorant is because there's like, what do you know about it? I mean, it's when you keep things
wait,
hidden.
that's what
When
we're saying we're for the education, so provide the education, provide the knowledge, let people know what's going on.
and they have more freedom to explore these things when they are not criminal.
And
We're
that's
trying to
time.
avoid street drug.
Third opposition, if you have some more prep time.
That was good. It was a bit slow paced. It was good.
All right, let's hear it for the member of opposition. By the way, you guys have about 40 seconds of prep time that you can use before the close.
So the thing is, if people can do whatever they want, how will the innocents, how will they be protected?
What do you mean? Could you clarify that?
You can't answer questions.
Oh, you can't answer questions. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll put it out there then. And then about how we're gonna get the educators. They're gonna be ex-drug addicts, people that know how it felt to be. The off-duty people, the officers, they're doing it because it's part of their job. It's part of what they're supposed to be doing by giving out the community service for the community. Well, they see the dangers of using drugs even though because they're in the field. About the major offenses, like you said, you guys are up for the crime too. You guys don't want the crime, but you guys are okay with people using drugs. But the thing is, we're not making using drugs an offense. We're making them build character so they can learn like, hey, you know what, I did something that I wasn't supposed to, but they give me a free pass. What if in the future I take drugs and I get caught with them, but I kill somebody or somebody gets hurt because of me? Kind of a way to tell them like, hey, you know what, you're doing something that's not right. But we're giving you a pass so you think about the future. Also, with your plan says that you would have the drugs at the pharmacies, which brings me to think: are they going to be over the counter? Anybody can just get them, or do you have to have a prescription to get them? And what would it be a pharmacy? Why can't they just go to a center like everybody else was talking about, making a center where they can just go pick up their drugs? If would it be a little more regulated, or do you think that having them at a pharmacy would be more safe when you know that people would do anything to get them, where the pharmacy doesn't have the security to keep them? Also, would the drugs be taxed, or would it just be, it wouldn't have a taxation at all on it? And then also I was wondering, what would be the punishments for driving under the influence of drugs? Would it be something like a DUI, or would it be different? Also, which are the drugs that you want to let people use? Would it be any drugs? Also, if you guys are agreeing with us about the education, what kind of programs would you guys be bringing up? Because that's one thing that I was wondering. In our case, we're actually trying to ratify the school district, well, the board of education. So they're the ones that are doing it, that they're making sure that everybody in the country, every single kid in the country gets the education they need about the dangers of drugs and how it can react in their lives. And what about those that don't want to? What about those that are already offenders? How will they be educated? Also, we will not be taking any money away from the country, as we're, every single person that will be working on this project will most likely be offered a volunteer. Basically, we won't have to be paying for. And I know we didn't specify about how they will be educated, but all these people are, they'll be trained before they go out there and just tell kids, hey, don't do drugs. No. They're gonna be educated before time, so that way they know what they're doing when they're up there, helping the kids. Let me just read our plan, that way you have a better idea of what we're doing. The plan we conceive is to influence as many individuals as possible in the United States to not consume drugs. Have the National Board of Education ratify the curriculum to emphasize more education on drugs. Teens 13 years and older who are caught consuming or in possession of drugs are to be sent to the state penitentiary for planned field trips, in which they will see the horrors of consuming and possessing drugs firsthand. Individuals who want to make a difference in their communities will volunteer to give a hand in our community, in our country. Off-duty officers will be required to give 5 to 10 hours a month of volunteer work in the community as role models in helping kids not to consume drugs. All those who are caught either consuming or in possession of drugs will have to do community service, either cleaning freeways or neighborhoods to build character by giving offenders community service. Instead of jail time, we'll be making sure our environment is rid of garbage. While they build character, the amount of service they will be required to do will depend on the severity of the offense they have committed. Those who actually commit a crime will be processed as a normally would. Do you have any questions?
No. I mean, did you understand our plan? Because I mean, you asked us, are all the drugs going to be legal? And I think we made that clear that yeah, they are.
So every drug?
Every drug.
Every drug?
Every drug.
No matter what the severity of the drug is?
Nope, not at all.
Okay. And what you see? Any other questions from the audience?
That's about time. Is there any questions from the audience, or are there?
You sure? You got time?
Yeah, you go ahead.
So you were saying that you're gonna decriminalize drugs, and what are you gonna do with people who are actually in jail for that? Things like that?
For like those? Well, if they already have a sentence, they're gonna have to go through it. We're not trying to change what it already is. We're just trying to make sure that the people that are committing crimes now, they're getting a second chance at it.
We'll be using them to educate the kids that don't live with us that are caught with drugs. They will be sent to the jails and the people that are incarcerated right now. We'll educate the kids and show them like.
So what about when they're no longer in jail? Who do you have?
We're influencing them to continue volunteering on education. So the first time people go through it, that experience it firsthand.
Yeah, because those are the most powerful volunteers we're going to be having, because they've already been through it all.
Okay, and that's time. Opposition team, you have about 40 seconds left, and then you can get to speech. All right, let's hear it for the leader of opposition.
Okay. With your plan of having everyone do whatever they want, even if they're harming themselves, whether they want to or not. Yes, they can. We understand that people have the right to do whatever they want with themselves, even if it's harming themselves. But they're not only harming themselves by using drugs, but they're also harming the family and friends who are watching them die slowly with violence, and pretty much drugs can kill you eventually. And they're gonna feel like they can't really help since they can do whatever they want, and even if they want to, they're gonna have to just watch and just not do anything because they don't have the right to help, because they won't be wanting the help themselves. If we enforce letting people harm themselves because it's their right, oh, like I already said that, okay. Not everyone will be educated on the drugs they're using, and even if they were, some will still prefer the street versions, which is more dangerous and can lead to more crime, and with both ways, people who are buying it and people who are selling it. And I really don't think that if you make everything legal, it will be legal the right way. You can't really enforce everything to be done the right way, especially with drugs. And if they're at the pharmacies, they will become more easily accessible to younger kids and people who are wanting to experiment since it's legal, and which will increase the amount of people who are going to start becoming addicted. And eventually it's just going to become a chain. The longer it's going to be legal, the more people are going to want to use it, the more people will become addicted. Eventually everyone will be addicted. And if they're not addicted, then they'll be the ones that are being harmed by watching their family and friends become addicted. And they will not be influenced to not start because they can do it if they want to, like you're saying. So that's just getting it.
And that's time.
You got 20
Right? Please welcome the Prime Minister. This is your last day. Last day.
Yikes. No pressure. Can I get an extra 30 seconds
A
then?
lot of pressure.
Okay. We're winning for two reasons. They did not really address our positive argument, and all their arguments were irrelevant. They basically said, yeah, people have the right to do that, but it's gonna harm other people. But this is a denial of one of my first premises, which is you can do whatever you want with yourself, so long as it's not intrude on the autonomy of others. While that may have unintended consequences for family, so what? You wouldn't make suicide or even depression affects other people, but you wouldn't make that criminal or illegal, so you wouldn't do that here either. They brought up a lot of points. They said, how will the innocent be protected? I wasn't sure what they meant by that. They said officers are going to be part of the job, but that requires more money. And what about the officers who don't want to do that, who are on payroll now? How are you going to change that? What if they don't want to do that? So you have problems there. They said, well, what about if you're driving, would you get something like a DUI? Yes, you would. Would they be taxed? Well, that depends if the drug people want to be in the business or not. That's up to their decision. Well, what about the offenders? How will they be educated? Well, they're not there to be educated. They're there to be punished. So what? Like I said, irrelevant. And another shocking thing that they said was that they were for decriminalization too. But we define that as being legal. Being legal or the spirit of being legal is to be decriminalized. So they actually agree with our proposition. So therefore they cede the entire debate over to us. They said everyone will be addicted once you make it legal, but cigarettes and alcohol are legal and addictive, but not everyone's hooked to those. So there's obviously a counterexample to that. They said, well, it won't be done the right way, but of course, if you paid attention to our plan, we're not doing anything the right way because we're not doing anything at all. It's not a positive thing we're doing, it's a negative. And education. If you have it out there, you will be more educated. Universities will be able to do a lot more research on them, and that will trickle down to the education system and to the teachers in their health classes and whatever. So if you're so worried about education, our plan is a lot better because you have more freedom to explore. Under yours, not so much. So, and that's why we're winning, because our positive case was not addressed, and that was huge, and all their arguments were irrelevant. So, thank you. Oh, wait. No. Okay. In sum, Yeah, I didn't get to read my last paragraph of my opening speech. In sum, the fundamental reason we are for legalization, or more accurately, the decriminalization of drugs, is for autonomy. Unless you're God, we advise you not to tell us how to live our lives. In the words of John Lennon, in the words of John Lennon, when the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer. Let it be. For though we may be parted, there is still a chance that they will see. There will be an answer. Let it be. Thank
There's so much value to pandering to your audience. All right, judges, discuss.
Oh crap.
Yeah. It's almost like you knew she was going to be judging.
My decisions.
Feel free to talk amongst yourselves.
I forfeit.
you for. Yeah.
I shot myself in the foot there.
You did. Yeah. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's gonna open a whole can of worms. Just be like, whatever about it if they want to do it.
I was like, damn it. I was like, I don't know how to follow that, man. I don't know where to go. Like, there's not a whole lot of room to play with. It's kind of like, it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't really know how to spend 4 minutes of time with these. It's from
Yeah, that's why I view debates. It's just one big system.
Alright, judges are staring at their pieces of paper. Everyone's ready? Alright.
Yeah. Well, so we chose the government, mostly because though in our discussion that we did feel like the opposition even a couple times said we want to decriminalize. And it may have been a Freudian slip or something, but it completely, that happening kind of unvalidated the very good arguments that they did make several times.
That's a fair assessment. Would you like to add to that?
It's not so much that we like their plan because it's kind of crazy to legalize everything, but they did defend it better than they did. They did have a good point about the police officers because the police officers are educated on how they're gonna do it, and they do have to do service too, because they do have to know how to treat people, how to deal with people when they see somebody who's high. So they do know what they're doing. It's not like we're just gonna get some random cops and be like, okay, you don't know what you're doing. They do know what they're doing, and they had a really good point about using the volunteers from the people, because a lot of people after they've been in jail for so long, they do want to do better and they do want to help stop other people. But it just got to, it was really close. It was just like, I don't know how to explain this. Their points were relevant, but they just defended theirs better. They were more forward about what they were doing about it.
I feel like besides them conceding, the aspect about decriminalizing, I feel like the research aspect was something it was good that they brought that up again later in the debate, because I feel like that was a major advantage of the government over the opposition. If we're looking at trying to have a more stable approach on the societal level toward drugs, I think the research would definitely help, and that's something that the opposition doesn't get us. I think that was a big issue. The other thing that I think was a major factor in the debate was that the government team had a really clearly defined and strong value and every part of their case linked to the value. Opposition team had a kind of a fuzzy value, and it wasn't strong enough to compete with the government's value, nor did they refute the government's value and say why we should prefer theirs over autonomy or why autonomy is bad. I think you started to get to it towards the end of the debate, though, when you brought up the fact that, for lack of, I guess the way I would have put it is to say that it's the government's responsibility to look out for harm that could happen to other people while balancing that out with the importance of having freedom of choice. So that would have given you more grounds to say we should have some legislation regulation, but really I think that the government also, especially in Eric's speech, could have done a better job of explaining why having people do community service or this idea of like trying to teach people a lesson really contradicts the government's value and really goes against it, and that's a bad thing considering what you guys had in mind. So I feel like while while Adrian did a good job of linking things to the value, and it seemed like you guys were on the same page, I think there were some things that you could have like linked back to the value and gotten more out of, and showing why the complete autonomy is more important. So those were a couple of thoughts. What did other people think? Josh, I know you're pretty engaged with this debate. Yeah.
I think that your side was pretty good, but yeah, like there was a couple points where you didn't really like tell us why theirs wouldn't really work. Like overall, it was good. The government did have a good side, and they did have good points, but I feel like they just didn't work.
Oh yeah, and of course, the opposition could have had stuff saying why the drugs that the government would legalize would be harmful, right? There was not really much of that happening, which is probably why you had some challenges filling your time in the second speech. That would have been a great time to load a bunch of information on about why these drugs are harmful and why legalizing them would be bad. There wasn't really much of that happening either, right? And also just overall, there was not much evidence used in this debate, though there was really good logic and there was really good kind of refutation of different points, and I like that part of it. Obviously, it could have been beefed up by a little bit more evidence to support ideas. And then in some cases, there were things being cited, there was like evidence being used, but we didn't know where it was coming from, and that's always something the other team can point out and get more out of. Of course, learning lessons at this point is kind of pointless, but I still think it's helpful to point these things out. Anyone else want to chime in? Final words? Final thoughts on this debate? Yeah.
I don't remember hearing like a timeline, like how long.
He said it's like right now.
Yeah, they said there's, but for the government team, there was a timeline.
Yeah, it's here, but I didn't get to it.
Yeah, doesn't really matter if the other team doesn't say anything about it, but yeah, it's a good thing to look for. Any other last remarks from the folks in the debate? Do you guys feel like it was a good debate? Or?
Yeah, I thought so.
He got his last word.
You did get your last word in there.
I did.
So how much did you disagree with what you were saying?
Just about all of it.
Completely.
Yeah.
It was very compelling.
I would like to see me debate me.
I don't know if everyone agrees with that. Some people might like to see that too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't believe hardly a word of anything I just said. So.
It's like, when he's ending with John Lennon pandering to the audience. But pretty effective pandering, I would say. Although some people might not really believe you, because we know you too well by now.
Yeah.
I think it's great to see that by the end of the end of the semester, people are able to debate really any position, very radical positions and very conservative positions that may not necessarily fit with their values, but also that there are ways within these debate resolutions to set them up so that it will open up space for different dialogues and different perspectives. And nice catch. So you guys can sit down.
Okay, cool.
Go ahead. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes going over the general guidelines. I'm not going to go over in depth because I already did that, and I imagine that most of you guys have looked at the guidelines. Although if you haven't, they are in your email. You can just probably search your inbox for argumentation analysis, and you should be able to pull them up pretty easily. Of course, you guys have also had the opportunity to practice a little bit too. I just want to hit up the basic guidelines and see what questions you guys have in general. And then I'll dismiss class and stick around for those of you who'd like help or feedback.